Chapter 2. Oriana struggled to breathe. Something heavy was pressing down on her chest. Her legs were numb, and it was dark, so dark. Her arms were held down. She tried to pull them out, but a searing hot pain shot through her left arm when she moved it. She screamed, and consciousness slipped away. Something smelled terrible. Like the time they found dead rodents in the field. Like that time Piero had tried roasting swine and burned the skin so badly that the neighbors came to see what the smell was. Sweat soaked her clothing, and the weight on top of her prevented her from taking a deep breath. Something whimpered pitifully. She realized the sound came from her own throat. Her limbs had all gone numb. Tears ran down her face towards her ears. I'm going to die here. Banging. Voices. Several people were speaking, but what were they saying? She couldn't remember why it was dark or why she couldn't feel her body. A dream? No. The house fell on her. She remembered. The ugly ship, the men in armored suits, Piero and Allegra on the ground, her parents. She held her breath. Were they searching for survivors to murder? You find something? The voice was closer. I thought I heard a noise over here. Closer still. Oriana tried to stay still, quiet, but a whimper escaped her as she tried to breathe. Tears rolled down her face. They're going to find me. A rumble came from her left. The voices were drowned out by grinding. The debris on top of her vibrated so hard she thought she might break apart. The weight was gone suddenly, and she cried out as blood rushed to her deprived limbs. She closed her eyes against the blinding sunlight. Sharp pain erupted through her chest, arms, and legs. She sucked in short breaths and tried not to move. We have a survivor! A man was shouting from very nearby. Let me through. The command came from a woman. A gentle hand touched Oriana's neck. Then the hand started to move over her arm. Her eyes flew open as she screamed. The woman kneeling next to her was dressed in an environmental suit, a uniform, white with pale blue along the sides. Galactic Fleet Medical. The woman had light golden brown hair and a pixie cut. Her blue eyes focused on Oriana's face. You're safe now, the woman said. Men rushed to remove the remaining debris from Oriana. The woman was between her and where she had last seen the bodies of her parents. Can you tell me your name? Her throat was dry. She licked her lips, tried several times before croaking, Oriana. I'm Oriana. The pain in her chest became a blaze, and she cried out as her vision blurred and the darkness closed over her again. Oriana woke to dim lighting. The hard ground had been replaced by a foam mattress covered in a cool sheet. The air held the sterile and recognizable scent of a medical facility. All around was the hiss of a ventilation system and the intermittent electronic beeps of medical equipment. She moved her head slowly to view her surroundings. Her clothing had been removed and replaced by a garment that she had only seen in pictures, a hospital gown. A thin white blanket was spread over her. The IV tube connected to the needle in her right arm led to a clear bag of fluids hanging beside the bed. Her left arm was encased in a hard sheath that kept it immobile. The head of the bed was against a wall, and a curtain wrapped around the other three sides. She gazed up at the smooth ceiling. The Galactic Fleet had come. Too late. The curtain slid to the side, and her rescuer entered before sliding the curtain back in place. She was still wearing white and pale blue, but no longer the environmental suit. This was a regular uniform. The insignia on her left shoulder suggested she was an officer, but Oriana hadn't memorized the ranking for fleet. There had never been any reason for it. I'm Dr. Gemma Fiore. Can you tell me your name? Oriana, she said, though she remembered saying it before. The doctor smiled and patted her right hand. You're safe now on the fleet ship Chicago. Do you remember what happened? Oriana nodded and fought back the tears that threatened. Dr. Fiore squeezed her hand. How old are you, dear? 17. We had guessed a bit younger, but still, this all must be very frightening and confusing. Do you want to talk about what happened? Oriana studied the doctor's face. She meant well, but Oriana was sure if she talked about it, she would just start crying. She shook her head. Did you get there in time to save anyone else? Dr. Fiore's smile slid away. She squeezed Oriana's hand gently. You were the only person we found alive. I'm so sorry, Oriana. Oriana nodded as tears escaped her eyes. The doctor stood silently. Oriana blotted her eyes with a corner of the blanket. How long was I asleep? It's been 2 days. You woke a little on and off, but you might not remember because of the sedative we gave you. Your ribs are badly bruised, but not broken. Your arm was broken in 2 places. That's why it's set in a hard cast. Your IV contains only simple fluids now. Do you have any questions about your treatments? No, doctor, I understand. I already had an apprentice rotation in medical. They said I'm good at it, but I don't think I have an affinity for it. Dr. Fiore laughed. Call me Gemma. You might be with us for a while. You can consider me your friend. Thank you, Gemma. Oriana yawned around the doctor's name. Get some more rest. I'll check on you in a few hours, but if you need anything, just press this button. She pointed to the red button on the side of the bed railing. A nurse will respond and get whatever you need. Oriana watched Gemma leave, then closed her eyes and let herself drift off. When Gemma checked in on Oriana the next morning, she was sitting up eating breakfast. The IV had been removed, and her left arm with its cast was in a sling. How are you feeling? Stiff, and it's difficult not being able to use my left hand. My ribs aren't as sore, I think. I'm glad to hear it. How did you find me? Gemma pulled a stool over and sat beside the bed. The Chicago was on patrol in the quadrant of space that your colony is in. Scans detected the exhaust trails of a ship where one should not be. It led us back to Mondo Doro. Since your colony is isolationist, we tried to hail your leaders from space before landing to find out what had happened. We were searching for survivors and clues when we came upon you. Where are you taking me? We're on the return leg of our patrol. Assuming there are no delays, we'll arrive at the starbase in 12 weeks. We'll figure out something by then. She paused when a nurse came in to retrieve the food tray. Do you feel up to talking about what happened? Oriana stared past Gemma for so long that it seemed she wasn't going to say anything. When she did start talking, she kept her eyes on an invisible point beyond the doctor. She recounted the details of the attack, and tears started pouring down her face. Gemma waited in silence until she was finished. Oriana's eyes refocused on Gemma. Do you think they're alive? She asked of her siblings as she wiped away tears with a corner of the blanket. I don't know. I wish I could tell you that they are, but that might not be so. I've never seen images or vids of people like them. Who were they, Gemma? Why would they want to hurt us? We don't know the answer to that yet, but everyone is asking those same questions. We will figure it out. When you're feeling better, we'd like you to look at some images of ships to see if we can identify the attackers. What happens after you know who they are? Well, that's up to the Galactic Union and fleet leaders. Oriana looked into the distance again. I wish I were stronger. I could have saved them. Gemma stood up and wrapped her arms around Oriana. Don't blame yourself, Oriana. It isn't your fault. There wasn't anything you could have done to stop them. Can you stay for a while? I don't want to be alone. Of course, honey. Gemma sat on the bed beside her and let Oriana's head rest against her shoulder. Oriana spent several more days in the infirmary. When Gemma was satisfied that she was strong enough, she let her get out of bed to start walking around. Oriana shuffled up and down the rows of curtained cubicles in slippers and wrapped in a white robe. The walls that the beds rested against were actually partial walls that stopped about a foot short of the ceiling and about 6 feet from each wall at their ends. Everything was white and silver with soft lights glowing overhead. Gemma's tiny office was near the front of the infirmary by the big sliding door that led out to the corridor. Oriana only caught glimpses through it if someone entered or left. At the back of the infirmary, past all the rows of curtained-off beds, there were several rooms that reminded her of fish tanks and aquarium vids. When she asked Gemma about them, she learned these were surgical and quarantine suites. During one of her walks, she wandered back to Gemma's office. "Gemma?" The doctor looked up from the computer screen on her desk. "How many people are on this ship?" 7,322, including you. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. I started to count beds and try to figure it out, but I decided to just ask." Gemma shook her head and laughed. "Getting bored in here?" "Well, yes. There isn't really anything to do except sit and think, and thinking makes me cry." "What do you think of moving out of the infirmary into my quarters? I have an extra room that I'm not using. It's tiny, but you'll have some privacy, and I can arrange for something more to occupy your time." "Are you sure I won't be in the way?" "Honey, I'm hardly ever there, and I enjoy your company." She stood up. "I've already taken the liberty of having a bed brought in, and I arranged for some clothing for you, so you can be dressed in something more comfortable than that hospital gown. Are you ready to get out of here?" "Yes, that would be great."